Welcome to the Self-Intelligence Podcast, where I have radically honest and heart-opening conversations with amazing people who are willing to share their stories and information that can have a profound impact on your life. Numerous individuals experience a profound sense of discontentment, disillusionment, and lack of purpose in their work and career path. People feel a yearning for a greater sense of meaning and purpose in their life, recognizing that survival alone may not contain the ingredients for fulfillment. In this episode, I speak with Georgie. Georgie was triggered by a podcast episode between Joe Rogan and Robert Kennedy Jr. that brought her back to the days when she worked in the medical industry as a dietitian and pharmaceutical rep. Her overall feeling was, the system has to change. While Georgie has made many changes in her career path over the years, she still feels this general sense of lack of meaning and purpose. So she reached out to have this discussion from the perspective of self-intelligence. A huge thank you to Georgie for opening up this discussion on meaning and purpose that affects so many. Thank you, Georgie, for coming on to the Self-Intelligence Podcast to discuss meaning and purpose, something that is very dear to my heart, and I have navigated this terrain with what feels like hundreds of people who have felt the call to do something a bit more meaningful with their lives is what they would say as the dialogue, going through life feeling like, what's the point of this? The hard questions start to emerge at some point. And then with that call comes a range of obstacles and fears and inner challenges and external challenges. And it all seems a bit like too hard even maybe, or very challenging. And then support is required. And yeah, I've been so blessed and honored to journey with people who have embarked on such a journey, and you have brought this up as a member of the self-intelligence community, bringing up that this has raised itself into your awareness. So why don't you share with us where you're at this point in time? And I just want to let the listener know you've actually come down sick, and so your voice may be a little croaky, but Georgie's very dedicated. Was like, no, I'm having this conversation. So I really appreciate you coming on and where you're at with that. So yeah, tell us a bit about where you're at, what has spurred on this conversation for you in yourself.
Yeah. So I was listening to a podcast that was by RFK Jr. and Joe Rogan, and it really triggered me. And my person anyway got very triggered. I just kind of felt really sad for the world. And, sort of with my history, I was originally a dietitian. I did that for 8 years because I felt like I wanted to, I suppose, just know about that. And it felt something that was quite sort of meaningful at the time. But then eventually I became kind of disillusioned with that and the way that research was kind of used in that field. And I felt like this calling to go do something that was in kinds of like bigger business somehow. It was kind of almost like I felt so disillusioned. Why not just go the whole hog? And so I actually started to work for a pharmaceutical company, and it was with nutrition products in the UK. But then when I came to Australia, I got a job with the same company with a drug that was a weight loss drug called Reductil. And so I promoted that to doctors for about 2 years or so. And then I kind of didn't really want to do that anymore. And I was like, do I go back to being a dietitian? So then I wanted a part-time job. So I got a part-time job working in HIV. And then while I was working in HIV, the really interesting thing was that a lot of the doctors at the time also had HIV or were within that community. And so it was a very personal thing to them. And during that time, they'd had some like pharmaceutical trials around vaccines for HIV, and those trials had been stopped. And so I was like, well, why did they stop these trials? And the doctors were like, well, because there was more HIV in the vaccine arm, like more people were getting HIV that took the vaccine. And they don't use live virus. It's not like they give people the live virus. So why this is happening? But anyway, they stopped the trials, right? And so that was, I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's not supposed to be what happens.
Yeah, was it like, do they not know everything? Is there mysteries? Is there a lot more for humans to discover about this stuff?
And then I was kind of like, I did that, and I did the dietitian. It's like, oh no, I don't really like this. I've been investing in property. I'll go be a mortgage broker. And then kind of a few years later, that drug that I'd been promoting for weight loss got pulled from the market, because obviously it had like a lot worse, like the worst side of it was far worse than the benefits, which is why they pull drugs from the market.
Yeah, I had this experience, Georgie. I was diagnosed when I was 18 years old for depression in 15 minutes with a doctor, and I was given a few different ones. This is a long time ago now, but I'm pretty sure it was Arapax, and I didn't have depression until I had Arapax. What I had was like anger issues, repressed challenges. That could have been dealt with in very different ways, but it kind of just got put into, maybe if you drug him, he'll be sorted out. And it caused more suicides than and issues than it was solving. So I realized I was a guinea pig, which is okay in a sense, but it's not really how we're conditioned to understand it. It's not like, it's sort of conditioned that you're looked after, you're completely safe, this is completely above board, this is known to be effective, this is known to help. I'm using the word known, all right, a lot here, right? Because then it's like, I can rest in the false sense of security that this is all completely and utterly taken care of, as you may have as a rep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Because you talked
the whole
about...
company was full of people who are very, very caring people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like most people are well-intentioned for sure in all industries in most ways, but we could get into where that changes. But because you talked about you were getting disillusioned, in the diet, being a dietitian, you see. And I think this is an important thing because we're talking about the broader meaning and purpose, meaningfulness. Does that make sense? And this is all going to tie in. So my questioning is going to very much relate across this whole conversation, because when the call for more meaning in your life happens, often that does come from a place of disillusionment. And what does disillusionment mean? Something about what you were believing doesn't make sense anymore. Something doesn't add up. Right?
Yeah.
So the illusion of what you were subscribed to, what you were believing is dissolving in your witnessing of what's really happening. Okay. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the disillusionment you're experiencing as a dietitian, which seems to have kept going even as you became a pharmaceutical rep and these things, right?
Yeah. So one of the specific things I think that got me was that, everything has to be on evidence-based medicine, right? That was the big cry back then. I mean, this is in the 90s, right? The early 90s, through to like the year 2000. And yet, for instance, one of the things that we were told was that we have to tell our clients to have margarine. Margarine is better than butter. That's what the scientific studies say for heart disease, right? But when they told me in our training how you made margarine, which is that you heat the molecule up to a specific temperature so that it becomes like the reverse molecule. So it now becomes a molecule that your body has never ingested before. And my understanding from my knowledge of stuff is that whenever you put something in the body, whatever it is that the body has never been exposed to before, you increase the risk of cancer. It's just a given because your body is going to try and do something about this thing. And so to me, I'm like, right, well, okay, there's evidence apparently about heart disease, but what about cancer?
Yeah.
And I didn't feel comfortable telling my patients to change from butter to margarine. That to me seemed like something highly artificial. And so I told my clients to use like avocado or low-fat cheese on their bread. Because I couldn't ethically feel it was right to use margarine. But if I told them to use butter, it was like I could be struck off as a dietitian.
Yes. So because you're a part of an association.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then as a part of that association, you have to meet the current standards and the so-called research that's absolutely 100% proven to be accurate. And if you got to follow this thing, and if you don't, and then we see your clinical records that you've been advising other things.
Or the patient goes and tells people.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and so
because this is important. Okay, what you're saying is important because a lot of people right now are feeling like their lives and what they've been subscribed to. I like to call it a subscription because you're subscribing to a belief system. Now, when you're a dietitian, you're not told it's a belief system, right? You're told it's factual. It's observed facts, right? Even though that's so obviously not true, given that the evolution that takes place in the science over time dramatically changes. Yes.
And of course, the evidence eventually came out that margarine was causing cancer.
Right. So then it's like we've got a major trust issue happening around information and around these so-called facts and beliefs and all this type of thing, don't we? Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably another conversation, or it may come up as we go along. But this is what I meant by the disillusionment. So you're not feeling that's aligning with something inside you, because this is what makes a human being, and perhaps not AI or something like that, where you can go, even though that's the information I've been given, I don't feel right about it.
Yeah.
Yes, this is important because it takes a lot of courage to acknowledge that whisper within yourself that goes, that's not feeling true. That's not feeling aligned with me. And not that I'm claiming to have all the facts either.
No.
But it just doesn't align with me. So how can I continue to be the good dietitian and then follow my own sense of what feels aligned when I'm so rigidly told exactly how I should be and what I should do and like this? If you would like to discover who you really are beyond the voice in your head and emotional states that cause relationship drama, stress, health issues, procrastination, sabotage, addictions, essentially all the drama and personal problems you can think of, come and join me for the Wake Up Experience, which is the first step in freeing yourself from the inside out. See the link in the description for more details.
And it's not even like, I don't know if I would have been struck off if I told people to eat butter, but the fear of it is there. The fear of it is there that if you don't follow these things, you're
told black and blue if you don't follow the protocol, because I understand that there's a relative standard that's trying to be created, right? The industry tries to create standards to protect people, but the standard itself is not in itself permanent.
Yes, absolutely.
But the standard is mistaken to be permanent as like it's the solid ground, but it's not the solid ground. It's a temporary ground in which we learn, and it's an important temporary ground. Standards are important. I don't have any issue there, but they're not presented as a standard that is transient. They're presented as
absolute.
They're presented absolutely. And then when people take things absolutely, when they're not absolute, they become fundamentalists in a very toxic way, which we see in religion, and we see in the religion of science, and we see in the religion of relationships, and we see in the religion of or I could say cult of all of those things, the cult of religion, the cult of science, the cult of this thing and that, whatever it is. We're trying to create standards to look after each other, to protect each other, and yet actually somehow that becomes abusive because it's misunderstood.
Yeah.
It could be useful if it was like, hey guys, we actually don't know everything, but this is what we're putting forward. And then everyone would be like, but that gives me a choice, because I'm like, well, I don't know now that if I want to do that, now that you've told it to me like that, maybe I want to make my own decision. And then there's like, oh, but shit, we don't want people to make their own decisions. That could be chaos, So yes, this is an important conversation, because when we're talking about meaning and the way that I tune in with you when you bring it up, this is what we're going to be, going into. So your disillusionment with being in the mainstream system, and a lot of people right now listening, they're in the corporate world, they're in, certain business sectors or whatever kind that have visions and goals and aspirations and value systems and all of this stuff, and so often feel so disconnected, like it's all just a big front of nonsense that's not really presenting what's really happening, but presenting a really nice idea that we can all kind of play along with and feel okay about, because, well, at least I'm surviving.
Yeah.
Right. So
Exactly.
you decided, I don't want to do this, right? At some point, you went into different
Mm-hmm.
places. So you said you went off and into the real estate world
Yeah, as a
at some
mortgage
point.
broker.
Yep.
So I got the job a month before the GFC, and I was working for somebody else. And so the number of leads that they had kind of, as soon as I kind of started working there, the number of leads like dropped by 3/4 or more.
Mm.
And so suddenly my job became doing marketing rather than being a mortgage broker. And the one thing that did slightly work was doing some SEO on their website. And so then I did a course in internet marketing, but eventually they had to let me go from the mortgage broker. And that then led into sort of like about a 2-year period where I only worked about 6 months. I had to move out of my house, rent it out. Like I had to go and I house sat other people's houses that had animals. And I actually had like 4 houses at the time, like 2 in Australia and 2 in the UK. Had to
Like you're of your
sell
own.
them.
Yeah.
To sell them mostly for less than what I bought them for. It was like massive financial crisis where my parents were giving me food vouchers, like Woolworths vouchers for birthdays and Christmas. That's what I was asking for.
Wow.
They gave me 30 grand or I wouldn't have survived. I wouldn't have kept my house. I would have survived. But I suppose that's what it felt like, right?
Yeah.
It was like this huge amount of loss that affected me for a long time.
Mm.
But during that time, because I kind of felt like, well, I mean, I'm at the worst point I can be anyway. I don't want a job because you can lose them. So I'm going to like do SEO for people. I mean, I never wanted a business. I never thought I wanted a business. I never thought I wanted to do any of this stuff. It was just like, well, this is where I'm at. This is what I can do. And this is how I'm going to survive.
Yeah.
And so over the last 12 years, I built my SEO business. And it's something that I'm really good at. And it's something that I get really good results from my clients from. And I have like, 30 clients who they're small business owners, they're family businesses. So I'm like supporting their families. But as you know, over the years that you've known me, I've always tried to do something else on the side.
Yes. So I've worked with Georgie on different things. She's very entrepreneurial, or loves to create new possibilities for services, essentially. And yes, out of the survival mode, you relied on the skills that you had at that time to support you at that time.
Yeah.
You could have chosen to go back into any kind of, you could have gone back to being a dietitian if you wanted to, I guess, but you were more attuned to the ambiguity, but also of the SEO. Well, if no one, if not everyone may have heard of that, search engine optimization. It's essentially what people who have websites, if they want to be searched, like the first to be seen and things like this, when you search for a plumber in on your phone and it comes up as the first result, people like Georgie are often behind how that works, because then that business gets the phone call to get the job, essentially. So that's extremely helpful. It's part of the process to connect services and so on. And you've been doing that for how long now?
I think it's like 12 years. I mean, it's longer than that, but that's how long as 11 or 12 years as my own business. Because I worked for somebody else for a while doing it, and I worked for Flight Centre for a while doing SEO, and then had my own business. So I like the industry as opposed to others, probably because there is no authority controlling it. And as much as, like you've said, that can be bad, because there can be really dodgy people out there who say they do SEO and charge people $1,000 a month and literally do nothing.
Exactly. Because it's like an unregulated industry, right?
There's no regulation. So that's the downside.
Yeah.
The upside of it is that for someone like me, when you don't have someone going, no, you can't do this, you have to do this, you have to do that, you can actually trial things and then get results for your clients that you wouldn't potentially have been able to get otherwise.
Yeah, this is a good
and
one
not,
for the listener, right? This is a good thing for the listener. If you can find someone in any industry that is really authentic and unregulated, you're going to get a really good service because they're not restricted, so that they can give you everything or whatever the case. They can give you all of themselves, and they're also going to offer you a service as though they were regulated, so at the highest standard.
yes,
The two
yeah.
come together. That's essentially why your business is thriving, and you've got so many clients, and they keep referring, and it keeps going because yes, you have that, but a lot of society is not working at that ethical level. There's more immaturity. They don't do the job. They're sort of just in it to get, not to give. Yes.
And yes, and look, I nearly wanted out of SEO in the beginning because of the fact that it seemed incredibly dodgy, like some of the things that I was being asked to do, right?
Yes.
And then Google changed something which stopped it being able to be dodgy.
Yes.
And that was brilliant.
Yeah, I remember talking to you about all the dodgy ways that you could approach
Yeah.
SEO and creating all these backlinks that meant nothing, and all of that still exists to some extent, of course. Like there's all that
and
stuff
people
out there.
can still do all kinds of things, but you can get results doing it legitimately and doing it within Google's guidelines.
Yes.
So I mean, Google is a regulator, I suppose.
Yeah, true.
But they're a regulator that doesn't say to you, these are the rules. Well, they do in a way. They do have some things, but generally they don't tell you.
You kind of just have to work it out as you're going along.
Yeah, they'll tell you some things like, this is against our guidelines.
Yeah.
But generally they're not going to tell you how or what you need to actually do to do well.
So you've navigated that terrain and enjoyed it to whatever extent. And now you watch this podcast, and this was on the vaccine topic, wasn't it? Of some kind.
Yeah, well, he spoke about a lot of things, but mostly that. And
around COVID and things, was it specifically? Or was it just in general?
I mean, he spoke, and because he's a lawyer, right? He's an environmental lawyer. That's what his thing has been for years. And so
his name
he
is
has to understand Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah.
And so he has to understand science at a level that enables him to win court cases, right? And so for years, he's like the Erin Brockovich. Most people know the movie Erin Brockovich. He's like the real life. I mean, I think she's real life too. She still exists doing the same thing.
Yes.
He's doing that kind of thing. So it's saving rivers, doing all these kinds of things. But he also then ventured into the vaccine world because the mercury that was the problem in the rivers was also something that he identified as a problem in vaccines. So he talks a lot about the childhood vaccination program, how in America there's like 72 vaccines, and how it turns out that there's not one single study that has ever been done to show that those vaccines actually work.
Yeah, that seems to come out with a lot of things, doesn't it? Where there's a so-called, like it's taken as a fact, like like vitamin, calcium and bone density and these things. Apparently that, I don't know what now the case is, but that seems so like obvious that there was some kind of research or study done behind that. And
I mean,
yet there was nothing.
I like assumed that. And he's like,
you just assume it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually he got a letter after,
being
a lawyer and requesting this data for years, eventually got a letter to say there is none.
Okay, so this started to now the trigger starts to develop, doesn't it? The trigger starts. So who can right now who's listening to this, you feel that like there's that.
This whole thing is based on a belief. I mean, science is based on you have a theory, you test the theory.
Yeah.
You get a result. I mean, it can be, there can be a lot of factors that influence that, like who's funding it, what the people think who are doing the trial, stuff we don't even know, right? But there's no data. Nada, nothing. It's all based on the theory.
Yeah.
It's the theory. And we're going forward saying this is
talking about
science.
A theory. Did you recently hear that because there's the Big Bang Theory.
Okay.
Humans are this arrogant that we actually think we can map back to the start of the universe. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, I cannot get a dentist to tell me in my teeth the same thing. If I go to 3 of them and say, look, what's my issue? 3 of them will give me 3 different answers. Okay. This is just like around teeth stuff, for example, if that comes up. Or if I go to a physio, they might give me 3 different regimes if I was to go with a hip issue or something like that. You know, if you actually go around and ask different people, you get very different points of view. And yet we somehow have this idea that we've come to a conclusive theory, if you like, that doesn't get presented as a theory. If you notice the tonality behind these things, all the scientists across the globe agree that there was a Big Bang. So it's a theory, but we're not going to speak to it like a theory. We're going to speak to it like it's a fact.
Yeah.
In the vibration of my words, it's going to sound like a fact, but I'm still going to use theory because that's more correct to say that. And so many textbooks and written information have been around on this. And then just recently, the telescope we have or whatever that goes out into the universe tracks all the way back to where we believe it began. Believe, of course. And there's these massive galaxies there that would take billions of years to evolve. So they're like, oh, we've got to rewrite all the textbooks. We didn't have our theory correct, even though we were presenting it energetically as though we had, you see. So I think this conversation is really bringing in this, isn't it? Like there's something about this meaning and purpose and this belief system theory side of things. There's something very important in our conversation to bring awareness around. Yeah. So because you're coming to it from this sort of medical dietitian sort of realm, if you like, initially at least, and now the vaccine thing. And there's now no evidence. This whole thing is based completely on theory.
So that's my first big trigger. Like,
that was your trigger.
Oh my God. Yep. Then the next one, which is something that I've heard before, but I hadn't heard it explained exactly how he explained it. And so he said with the COVID trial, with the Pfizer COVID trial, 22,000 people in the trial. You know, you have the vaccine arm of the trial, you have the control arm of the trial. And so one person in the vaccine arm died from COVID. And in the control arm, 2 people died from COVID.
What do you mean the control arm and the vaccine arm? What do you mean?
Okay, so whenever you do a trial, and actually, God, this is one of the most fascinating parts, right? So whenever you do a scientific trial, you have to have a control group and a group that gets the treatment. So the reason that you have to have a control group is because of a thing called the placebo effect.
Yes.
So what happens is that you can give somebody a medication, or you can give them a sugar pill and they get better.
Yes.
Where you're not so they have to control for that, and they have to go, okay, well, we have to get better results in the drug arm than in the control arm, because there'll be people in the control arm who will miraculously get better, even though they're given nothing. And in my mind, I'm like, why isn't every dollar being spent on the placebo effect?
I used
That's
to
the
speak.
most amazing thing ever.
I used to speak so much about this when I was teaching emotional anatomy, and there was so I had to explain, and this is still to this day, there is a body-mind connection. As though that's a new thing. And I would explain it in so many different ways, you know, like you could have one thought right now about you're about to go public speak, and all of a sudden you feel your heart rate go up and all of these different things, right? And it's like nothing was really happening, but there's a body-mind connection. And one of those was placebo as a really phenomenal level, where people that needed knee surgeries and things like that. I remember this one on knee surgery, right, where they made cuts into the knee. Like it was like radical placebo effect, this control group. And the people who didn't get any surgery, but they did get opened up and stitched back, you know, were healed of their knee issue. And we're talking bone on bone, no cartilage. Like we're talking bizarre reconstruction required. Because it goes against the whole subscription. If we focus on this one area, how can we subscribe to the rest? It's exactly what happens with every narrow cult-like viewpoint. It's if anything contradicts my narrow perspective, I have to deny it exists, because it would collapse everything. Right? Because so we cannot look there because our agenda is to do this. It's like, and that's
That's what RFK says as well, because when they interview, because I watch a number of his interviews, and when the interview says to him, like, how is it for you when you've been out there for so many years and so many people just don't believe anything you say and they censor you constantly? I mean, his videos are getting pulled down now, even though he's a presidential candidate, which is against the law, but it's still happening, right? And like, how is it for you as someone who's out there speaking what you believe to be your truth, and this is happening? And he's like, well, I understand that if someone believes me, what they potentially are having to give up.
Yes. And it's become clear in the work that we're doing with self-intelligence that loss is our greatest fear. So what do I stand to lose if I open my perspective? Is so unbearable. I would prefer to be completely out of integrity. I prefer to generate shame over my entire life and not follow my heart and not be authentic, just to not face that unbearable loss. But you have had a different journey because you have followed that path and you've experienced those losses, right? But it's got you closer and closer to what's more aligned to you. So it's like, there's an alignment essentially continually happening there. And it sounds like you've just had another call, another kind of like sort of, so that's essentially what we're discussing. But I like the way that we're approaching this because I think that's very relatable to where a lot of people are at who are listening to something like this, where there's an openness, like the ears are open. It's like, I'm willing to let go of my current structure. I'm willing to let go of my current tunnel vision because it's causing too much suffering now, or there's nothing fulfilling about it, or it's a depressiveness in that, or heaviness or anxiety or whatever the case is, or just not living true. Just that sense of not living true. There's something that doesn't feel integral and stand up within yourself, not like from the perspective of other people, because gosh, on that level, that won't make any sense, you know? If you would like to download a free beginner self-recognition guided meditation audio to start your journey of healing and freeing yourself from the inside out, see the link in the description or go to selfintelligence.com.
And that's kind of where it kind of went for me into that, looking at loss from the perspective of what he was talking about, and how so in this trial you've got the two arms, you've got that, right? And so they can say 2 people died here, 1 person died there, therefore it's 100% effective. And but then if you actually look at all cause mortality, which is everybody who died in the study in both arms, there was like 1 person that died in the control arm from this heart-related condition and 4 people in the vaccine arm. And you're like, how did that ever get approved?
Yeah.
So it's okay if we save 1 person from COVID and 3 other people die from a heart condition.
Yes.
So be it, you know.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, I didn't want to believe it. I'd heard it before, but I didn't want to believe that would be true. You know what I mean? But it's like,
well, that's perfect, isn't it? What you just said.
Like, I don't want to believe that's true. I don't want to believe that that's the people would. I'm like, how does that happen? You know, and then I'm like, well, of course it happens because, you know, if you look at the fact that there was a lot of people who have openly said they took the vaccines because they would lose their job and they couldn't afford to lose their job.
Yes.
You know, it's loss there. And then if you go right back to the beginning, the FDA, that's the people that have approved the vaccines in America. And like RFK was saying, they're funded 50% or more from the pharmaceutical industry. So the body that is supposed to regulate, the Food and Drug Administration, that regulates which drugs we're allowed to take, is funded by the same industry whose things that they have to approve. I mean, where does that ever happen? Like,
well, see, this
happens
is where
more than I think, but and then you've got the fact that the TGA in Australia is apparently, according to stuff that's been happening in Parliament in Australia that they've been discussing, is 90% funded by the pharmaceutical industry. They didn't even look at the trial data. They approved it because the FDA approved it. And then you've got all the health officials in Australia, and then you've got all the media and everything. I mean, none of them probably have any science background to even read a scientific paper if their life depended on it anyway. But they didn't get the chance to because the FDA was like, because I don't know who stopped it initially, I don't know what the rules are around why that paper why everyone didn't have access to these papers from the very beginning. Why is it just the FDA that has the access? And then, somebody there is like, well, if I don't approve it, I'm going to lose my job. And they'll just get somebody else in to replace me who will approve it. So everyone's afraid of losing. So this is what happens.
Yeah, like my first example, because a lot of, just going back to something like this, the mind often, for those who are open to this, will generally go, yeah, it's all about money, which is true to a large extent. But my first experience with this was I was 4 years old. I asked my mum, is Santa Claus real? I had a sense this is not true. I didn't even have a chimney, so I'm not sure how that was going to work. I think there's something amiss, or you can have decent logic when you're young. And she said, no, it's not true. And I was like, I kind of sensed that was the case. Now, the way I interpreted truth was that was a great thing. I didn't interpret it as loss. So I didn't interpret that like I'm not going to get presents anymore, and Christmas is screwed and da da da. I didn't see it like that. That was just, I don't know why that's the case, but I just didn't interpret it as a loss. Okay, so I go to school thinking I found a gold mine, which is truth, to tell the kids. And I started telling them. And I'm not getting the body language that's making sense. No one's wanting to listen. In fact, all of a sudden, they're starting to clump together and they're whispering and looking over at me like I'm feeling now like an outsider, you see. And I actually became an outsider. I lost a lot of friends. Could have been for a week. I don't know. When you're a little kid, everything seems really big. But I certainly wasn't allowed, wasn't invited to certain birthday parties and stuff like that. And I didn't understand at the time why this fact, why this information would be rejected. Like, would there be no openness to it? And it took later down the track to see, they were afraid they were going to lose something. They were going to lose their fantasy. They were going to lose presents. They were going to lose maybe the essence and that feeling you get around Christmas, right? And it's like, so we can all say it's about money, but really money is like the adult version of Christmas. But it's like, this is what I get. When I have money, I get this thing and this thing and this thing. What happens at Christmas? I get this and this and this and this, and I'm so excited about everything I'm going to get. And if I have information that says I'm going to lose all this stuff, well, I'm going to reject that.
Yeah.
I'm going to simply and utterly reject it. And the human kingdom is at a very low consciousness level where it doesn't know that you receive in giving, not in getting. In giving. And when meaningfulness comes, let's get onto this segue, right? It's often around, what am I prepared to give? Something shifts and says, I'm not here just to survive in the way that I have been, but I feel to give of myself in a way I haven't even been conditioned. Do you know what I mean? And there's a really deep sense of risk that comes with that giving. It's like, yes, but there's also this sense that the bigger risk is that I don't.
Yeah.
That I live this whole life not fully expressed in the fullest of myself, like the fullest of my giving capacity, right? Which is where happiness actually is. It's not in just, basically being in that low level survival space.
Yeah.
It's also important, of course. Okay, it is very relevant and important as part of the growth chapters. So you've survived well, and now it's like that growth goes, okay, now you have the potential to offer more of yourself.
Yeah, so the third thing that then triggered me from that conversation was just, here's this person, if he gets in to be president, he's going to make sweeping changes of systems, remove pharmaceutical funding from the media, from all these organizations. Like, there's all this stuff that he's going to do, right, to change.
He better get
systems.
a good bulletproof vehicle, eh?
I know, right? And he's telling all the people. He didn't telling the exact people who he's getting rid of even, right? The CIA, everything, right? And he's gone full out. But there was something in all of that that just kind of made me like, and what have you done with your life? You know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
When you listen to sort of what he's done with his life and, you know, the amount of impact and change and the possibilities for what changes that he could make if he survives. And so that just made me again kind of look at, you know, well, what are you doing? Here you are, you've got this SEO business, it is successful. It might have huge meaning to somebody else to be, you know, what I'm doing, how I'm helping these families. But I've been fostering cats for like a year and a half now, and like the meaning, like how I feel about that and the meaning that I get from that is so much greater for me. And I have this desire to like change the rescue system somehow so that not so many cats and dogs are being euthanized at pounds. And I don't understand the system enough to even know like where the problems are in the system, because I'm only, you know, one tiny part of the system, the fostering part, you know.
Well, let's open that up a little bit, because you just dropped a bombshell there, right? So this is extensive what you're doing. Okay, you run an SEO business, but what people don't know, because you can't quite see it right now, is you've converted your entire house into like a kitten cat sanctuary kind of midway place for like fostering cats, right?
Yeah.
And then people come and you've made major modifications to your house to do this, right? So
yeah, I just enclosed the balcony. So yeah, it's awesome.
Now, this is why I was like, okay, let's have this conversation, Georgie. I'm aware of this before we have this conversation. I'm like, that's it. Because there's something in that has the energetic of you giving of yourself in a way that's so natural to you, in a way that resonates with you. And there's no end to what you can discover in that journey. Yes? Mm-hmm. There's no end to it. It's just like you start at home with yourself, and then that can expand, and you can like it's an endless possible stream of influence and education and awareness and system changing and all of that can take place. Yeah. And all the while you're feeling like
frustrated because it's not happening fast enough.
Okay. There we go. Now is where the self-intelligence comes in.
Over here with this thing that earns me the income, and I don't know how to earn any income in the animal side of things so that I could move over to there. Yeah.
Yes.
And so there's just this frustration of feeling of, you know, this is great, it supports me, and I've been you know, trying to do things. I'm like, right, well, what if I bought somebody else's SEO business, I make mine bigger, I then have the opportunity to bring somebody else in who can do the part that I do. I have staff, but none of them can do the technical part that I do. So if I had a bigger business, the problem is that if I just build it slowly and I just keep taking on more clients and more clients like I have been doing, I don't really still have enough money to employ somebody, but I just then work a huge amount of hours, and it takes me further away from what I'm actually trying to do.
Let's put this question out there right now to the audience. Who feels like if you could fund it, if you could see how the money was going to happen, that you would pursue what feels to you to be more meaningful? This is a huge barrier. The first barrier is actually, I don't have any idea what I would do, right? It started, I went to school, they told me what to do, and I went, is that what I'm supposed to do? And then I did it. And it just stayed like that. I got into jobs and they just told me what to do and I just do it. Like, it's just been like this. You see, I've never been my own boss or made my own rules or made my own structure or made my own infrastructure or made my own policies. You've done all of that as an SEO person. You run your own business. It's a different chapter, you see. So the first challenge is that, because you've got to align with your natural talent, your, you know, curiosities and passions. And this is where certain types of like life coaches and things become sort of helpful to draw up all of those things, to be like, you know, this is what you're naturally drawn to and gifted at. And then there is there's these transitional jump points where you have to focus on the thing that you're wanting to move towards and trust in the way that things start to support that. So anytime you make a movement forward in the direction that is your passion and where you really want to be, the real growth is not what you're doing. it's not the cats or it's not whatever it is. It's not the policy change. It's not the vaccine improvement. That they're secondary things because they're all transient. They're all going to be improved. They're all going to be, temporary within themselves. Does that make sense? So what the important point is that you are learning to navigate to the thoughts that tell you it's not possible, that limit the possibilities, right?
Because I can't think about how it's possible.
No, you cannot know. Wow. You cannot know what's going to be the step ahead from your mind. Your mind can only work from the past, project from the past into the future.
I feel like we've had this conversation many times before, Chris.
We probably have. And so it's just a reminder, likely, because you now are equipped with more awareness that actually I can now differentiate between the psychological fear that I'm dealing with, which is the fear of loss, the fear of failure, the fear of humiliation, the fear of not being enough, the fear of, and then go, okay, that's the psychological barrier. Once I address the psychological barrier, not just that, but the judgments, the conditioning, the belief system conditioning, all of those things, when you step forward, they all come up to meet you. They're a gatekeeper that says, you don't go past here. Now, why do they come up? They come up because if you just step beyond them, you're no longer the person you thought you were, which is the current idea you have of yourself. And you've done this many times because you stepped out of, this is why I like that we stepped through your journey, because every single time you were something that you stopped becoming.
Yeah.
I was a dietitian. Now I'm a pharmaceutical rep. Now I'm a mortgage broker. Now I'm an SEO. It's like, okay, which one are you? Clearly none of them. Right. But every single step you had to let go of what was true. You had to let go of something in order to embrace the new expanded potential.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it wasn't so hard the first few times. It was only hard in the last time because of the financial loss that I experienced. And so being triggered by the fear of that again, that somehow that's going to happen if I don't keep this SEO business.
Yes. So when you have your inquiry in front of you, your self-inquiry process, it says one of the questions, what images of the past arise when you think that thought? And then there the image will come. And it's like, oh, I'm being dictated by this image. Yeah. The past, me losing my houses and me being destitute, my parents giving me food vouchers. This is a horror movie. It's no wonder it would cause, you to feel blocked, of course. And then as you've discovered, your discipline is to come back to that witnessing place, so that you're not acting on behalf of the limitations of the past, because the witness is not entangled in the past.
Yes, exactly. Because it's like I just witnessed it then, like the person in my head saying, your SEO business saved you. That's your savior.
Yes. So now that's the new identity.
So, of course, I wouldn't have wanted to let that go. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. The thing is, you don't know how it's all going to unfold. That's not the point. You don't know if you're going to keep it. It's going to be there to some degree. It's going to be completely removed.
And
none of that's known.
To that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so the way I support this is not by saying this thing has to happen and that thing has to happen, because that's not actually true. No one knows how these things unfold. I think that's the limitation often in some ways of the coaching world, which will sort of say, these are the actions that have to happen. And many times they have nothing to do with the alignment of the natural unfolding of things. The natural unfolding is aligned with when you align with that which is not afraid, not in fear. Now, one of the fears you have that is important to inquire around is this is not going fast enough. Okay? That thought itself will bottleneck your energy and actually make the whole thing go slower. Why? Because you have to get what you fear.
Oh, God.
If it's not going fast enough, then the mirror reflection has to be it's not going fast enough, because the universe, everything that's happening in our world, in our lives, is only a reflection.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay? So it's not going fast enough. Who can relate to that thought? it is a thought that a lot of people have, particularly those who are in that higher vibration of this, I call it the solar plexus, active, creative breakthrough barriers type energy, where you can make new systems, you can make change happen, you can make an impact. This is very solar plexus energy, but it also comes with it's not happening fast enough. Right? It comes with these types of delusions. So you have to sit with the part of you and realize, I'm suffering that thought. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. And is that thought coming from the vibration of love, or is that thought coming from the vibration of fear?
Fear.
Okay. So nothing you create from the vibration of fear is going to be productive.
Yeah.
That's end of story. It's like you can talk about that as a mathematical fact, if you like.
Yeah.
If it comes from fear, psychological fear, I mean, then you will create from that vibration, and that's the results that you start to get. And it doesn't mean that you're completely free of fear when you take action on things. It's that you're willing to continually drop the unnecessary psychological fear as the journey goes. Does that make sense? Yeah, just keep seeing it. Just keep seeing it and not being like lived by it. Do you know what I mean? It's like not let it drive, it doesn't have the wheel. Do you know what I mean? It can maybe be in the background yelling and be a backseat driver. There's a really annoying backseat driver, not the one who's steering. So the world of people that want to make a meaningful impact, if they really check themselves, the vast majority of those people are actually coming from the vibration of fear, and then wondering why the world is not changing in the way that they'd like. And so, this whole thing is vibrational. It's one big dream. There's nothing real about this in the way that we misinterpret. You know what I mean? And then, so when you meet when you meet this passion business that you're doing with the cats and all of that, and you're meeting it with a vibration of love, which is only because you removed, this is not happening fast enough, something that simple. Okay. Then you're much more open to solutions. Creative ideas can come now because your cup's empty, and synchronistic events can take place much more readily for you. You see, because there's that, it's like when you're in a vibration of love and truth, you become invitational. So people start to ask you to support things, and all of a sudden they're taking you on a trail. Whereas when you have to make the meaning, because me, the person, thinks this is no good and life should be better and this should change and it's almost like you come up against an invisible force field. Okay. And some people have the energy to break, they can try force their way through that. Like they have the constitution like that. And other people, they would just go, I'm giving up too hard, that type of thing. It's sort of one or the other, the forcers and the giver-uppers. And anyone listening be like, oh yeah, I'm a forcer, and I just give up, that type of thing. But you'll continually come back to the fact in yourself, or that feeling in yourself, where I'm currently growing has had its day. I've outgrown the container that I'm in. It's time to move to the next discovery of growth.
Yes.
But that
is what happened in the other ones. Like it was very much more like it's a time to move, and maybe I don't know that I necessarily have that feeling quite yet.
Well, I don't think it needs to. If you're talking to me, because remember, you're going to talk to different people at the different vibration that you're in, and that includes the listener who's listening to this. If you're talking to me, you're wanting the reflection of finding that peace within yourself, no matter what's happening outside. Okay.
Yeah.
And that peace is the driving force for change, not the driving force for change being not enough. I'm triggered in a way of right and wrong, judgments, good and bad, all of that kind of thing. And I'm really glad that we end this conversation there, because when we talk about the vaccine and the greed on the planet and the crazy systems and all of this, it goes into a bit of a place of right and wrong. And I'm not going to take it there at all. Everything has its relative moment in this dream. And that may be frustrating to hear it like that too. Like, what do you mean a dream? What are you talking about? Do you know what I mean? It's like,
not for me, but yeah. Okay.
When I talk about it, what I talk about this as a dream is Georgie can wake up in the morning, and as you wake up, you're waking up fully attached to the thought, this is not happening fast enough. And everything now is projected and colored by that thought, and that's the dream I'm talking about. But if she's to take that thought and go, I'm suffering that thought, I'm going to do inquiry, I'm going to dissolve that thought into nothing and let it be a cloud floating by. Let it move, not grab it with my will and hold it. Now, all of a sudden, the dream completely changes. It's like, oh, I'm more available to my cats. I'm more available to this moment. And there's a part of me that wants to come back in and go, no, it's not enough. And it's like, oh, that's the part. That's the part. Because I don't feel like I'm enough. So I project I'm not enough onto my business or whatever and say it's not enough. I'm not doing enough. I should be doing more, this type of thing. And then it's like, oh, okay, I see the reflection. Yes, because you are going to be far more effective, far more productive, far more efficient, not having that idea driving your behavior, your actions. Say with the cat business you got and the whole the rescuing and that you're doing there, than from those limiting thoughts. And that's very counterintuitive
because that it's not happening fast enough. I'm not doing enough. That's the overriding thing that drives everything, right? And so
exactly.
So for me, and I keep forgetting that, and so, but I'm not there with the, it's not happening fast enough, but I will be now.
But there is a should there too, because it should be happening faster.
Yeah, that's true. I don't use that word though, do I? So I don't recognize it.
But that's the energy behind it.
Totally. It should be happening
It should be happening faster. And the thing is, what I'm saying only makes everything flow better, more efficient, faster, meets the moment.
Ironically.
Right? The other slows everything down because its fear is the only thing that can be produced. When these universal laws are understood, one day maybe they're going to be taught at schools or something like that. You get what you fear. If your action's coming from here, it's going to produce this result. This is what's going to happen. Then we know then how to discipline ourselves, to habituate ourselves by coming back to ourselves, the place that the true self of us, which is not in a place of fear. Then it's like, okay, I'm going to go there first, then I'll take the action. I'm not going to go to that thought, then take the action. Because it's going to just be a world of suffering. So thank you for bringing this meaning, purpose kind of conversation here, because we're really talking about a very different how to approach that. That there is method, there is habits, there is skills, there are processes in the way in which one would approach that whole unfolding. So then there's not this feeling of staying stuck between force and giving up, essentially, which is where most people feel and experience.
Yeah.
And where that call inside, that hero's journey then can be met, the call can be heard and not denied, you see. So we'll catch up and see just where things have taken place and what's unfolded and what magic has come to support you and what grace has entered your experience by approaching in this very different way and by being very disciplined and willing to let go of the false you in order to let it flow in its natural course.
Because now it feels like, who are you to judge whether it's fast enough or not?
Yeah, exactly. Oh no, and in what context could you even decide that it's happening fast enough or not? It's so limited.
Oh God, it is, isn't it?
It's so ridiculous. I mean, this is the point, because it's so easy to judge, it's so easy to judge all these systems, isn't it? Like the system of, like, say, the medical system or whatever. And it's like, have you looked at your own system? Your own system is what created those systems.
It's true.
It's bonkers in here.
True.
But we don't look in here because we're not conditioned or even know how. And then once you know how, it's like, okay, I know what my job is. I'm here. That's my purpose. That is my number one purpose. It's to clean this out so I can be a vessel for truth and love and the vibration that was already there that I didn't create. I didn't create any of this. It just comes through. And it's so amazing. But yeah, it can be quite a journey to accept that. That's the journey from the head to the heart. So yes, thank you for offering this up.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, indeed. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll have you on again soon enough to see where it's all
ended up.
How it's all happening. All right. Thank you, Georgie.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you got value out of this, please share it so that other people can benefit also. For more information about self-intelligence, including joining my next Wake Up experience or detailed information about my self-intelligence course, go to selfintelligence.com.